Warning: this story destroyed a marriage, friendships, and lives. If you're not ready for the truth, don't keep watching. Let's begin. Throwaway, because obviously. Also because my husband knows my main, and I am not in the mood for a live-action courtroom drama in my own comment section. So yeah, I cheated. Or technically cheated, depending on how you define things, which I know Reddit loves to argue about. I'm posting here because my husband thinks he's the victim, and while I'm not saying he isn't emotional right now, the narrative he's building is generous to himself. We've been married 8 years, together 11, no kids, thank God, a dog we barely agree on, and a house that always smells faintly like resentment and laundry detergent. From the outside, we look fine. Dual income, dinners with friends, vacations we post selectively cropped photos of. Inside the marriage, dead quiet. Not screaming, not dramatic, just stale, like bread you keep forgetting to throw away. The first signs of trouble weren't the cheating. They were way before that. He stopped noticing me. I don't mean in a bring me flowers every day way. I mean I could have shaved my head and he would have said, huh, and gone back to his phone. Conversations turned into logistics. Who's picking up groceries? Whose turn it is to walk the dog? Did you pay the internet bill? Romantic, right? I tried. Before anyone jumps on me, I tried. I suggested therapy. He said we were fine. I tried date nights. He canceled twice, then forgot the third time. I tried talking, like actual talking, and he'd nod and say, yeah, I get that, which is husband for, please stop. So when I say the marriage was already cracked, I mean it. I didn't wake up one day and decide to be a villain. I woke up bored, lonely, and honestly a little angry that this was apparently my forever. That's the context. That's the part everyone skips when they want a clean good guy, bad guy story. Anyway, that's where it started, or where I tell myself it started. Here's where things get messy, and yes, I'm aware this is where Reddit usually decides I'm trash. That's fine. I've been called worse this week. The guy wasn't some mysterious stranger at a bar. That would have at least been cinematic. It was Marcus. I'm using his real name because frankly he deserves the mild inconvenience. Marcus works in IT at my company. Married, 2 kids, wears those stupid running shoes with jeans, and still somehow gets away with it. If you asked me a year ago whether I'd ever even notice him, I'd have laughed. What happened was a work retreat. Mandatory fun, trust falls, cheap wine, everyone pretending they like each other more than Slack requires. My husband didn't come because work is work, which, okay, fine, but also annoying when everyone else brought spouses and I was the lone married woman making polite conversation with a divorced VP who kept touching my elbow. Marcus and I ended up stuck at the same table during dinner. He listened. Like, actually listened. Asked follow-up questions, remembered things I said 10 minutes earlier. I know that sounds like bare minimum, but after years of emotional beige, it felt intoxicating. He laughed at my jokes. He complained about his marriage in that vague, careful way men do when they're testing the waters. I complained back. We bonded over mutual disappointment, which is apparently my love language now. Nothing happened that night. Before anyone gets excited, we hug goodbye. A long hug, sure, but still technically HR approved. Then the text started. Innocent at first. Memes. Complaints about work. Did you survive Monday? Kind of stuff. I didn't hide it because I genuinely didn't think it was anything. Also because I'm not as sneaky as people think. I just don't feel guilty until it's too late. Unexpected event number 1. My husband did notice, not the texts, me. Suddenly he was asking why I was smiling at my phone, who I was talking to, I almost laughed because the timing was ridiculous. Years of emotional neglect, and now you're Sherlock Holmes because I chuckled at a meme. I told him it was a coworker, which was true. I told him it was work stuff, which was adjacent to true. He shrugged it off, but something shifted. He started watching me the way you watch a pot you don't trust not to boil over. I should have stopped then. I didn't. And yes, I know what that says about me. This is where I start lying more creatively. The texts turned into late-night texts. Then, "Are you still up?" texts. Then, "Don't reply if this is weird" texts, which is always code for "this is absolutely weird." I told myself it was harmless because nothing physical had happened. I told myself emotional cheating wasn't real, which is hilarious because I absolutely would have lost my mind if my husband did this to me. Unexpected event number 2. Marcus's wife emailed me, not accusing, not angry, just a weirdly polite message asking if I'd noticed Marcus being distracted lately at work. I stared at my screen for a full 5 minutes, like it might bite me. I didn't reply. I showed it to Marcus instead, which in hindsight was a masterclass in poor judgment. He panicked, said she was paranoid, said she always did this when she felt insecure, said I was the only person who got him right now. I ate that up, absolutely inhaled it. I like being special. I won't pretend otherwise. Around this time, my husband started trying again. Of course. Suddenly he wanted to cook together, watch shows, touch my back when he walked past. I found it irritating, which I know sounds awful, but it felt fake, like he was responding to a threat, not to me. So I lied. I said work was stressful. I said I needed space. I said my phone was blowing up because of a project deadline. All technically believable, which is the most dangerous kind of lie. Unexpected event number 3. My husband found my old journal. Not snooping. He was genuinely looking for a warranty for the dishwasher, because that's the kind of marriage we have. The journal had nothing explicit, but it had feelings. Long, messy paragraphs about being invisible, about wanting to feel wanted, about how sometimes I imagined what it would be like to be with someone else. He didn't say anything right away. He just got very quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that rearranges the air in the room. And still, I didn't stop. I told myself I was already in too deep, which is something people say when they know exactly what they're doing and don't want to admit it yet. The actual discovery wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on collars, no hotel receipts. It was dumber than that, which somehow made it worse. Unexpected event number 4. I dropped my phone in the driveway. I didn't notice right away. I walked inside, kicked off my shoes, started ranting about traffic like a normal person. My husband went back out to grab something from the car and found it face down near the tire. Screen lit up, message preview visible. Terrible timing, just the worst. It was Marcus, something smug and familiar. Still thinking about last night. I hadn't even told my husband I went anywhere the night before. I'd said I stayed late at work, which okay, technically I did, just not alone. When he walked back in holding my phone, I knew immediately. There's a look people get when a story they trusted collapses all at once. His face didn't go red. He didn't yell. He just looked rearranged, like someone had moved the furniture in his head without asking. He asked who Marcus was. I laughed. Actual laugh. I don't know why I do this. Panic, probably. I said, a coworker. Like that explained everything. He asked why a coworker was thinking about me with a winky face at 10:47 p.m. This is where I started lying fast. I said it was a joke. I said Marcus was flirty with everyone. I said my phone was blowing things out of proportion. I accused him of snooping, which is always a bold choice when you're clearly caught. He didn't buy it. He scrolled. I let him. I don't know if that was arrogance or exhaustion. Maybe both. The messages weren't explicit, but they were intimate, familiar, inside jokey, the kind of tone you don't use with someone who means nothing. He sat down at the kitchen table and just stayed there, staring at nothing. That scared me more than if he'd yelled. I remember thinking very clearly, oh, this is real now. And here's the worst part. Even then, even watching him process it in real time, my first instinct wasn't guilt. It was irritation that I'd been sloppy. The confrontation stretched out over hours, not yelling hours, talking in circles hours, the kind where everything feels sticky and slow, and you start resenting the sound of your own voice. He asked if I was sleeping with Marcus. I said no. That was lie number. Honestly, I lost count by then. At that exact moment, it was still technically true, which I clung to like a life raft. I explained, over-explained, about work stress, about feeling lonely, about how Marcus was just someone who listens. I framed myself as misunderstood rather than unfaithful. Very intentional. He asked to see everything, not just the messages he'd already read. All of it. Email, Slack, Instagram DMs. I hesitated just long enough for him to notice, then handed over my phone like I was being generous instead of cornered. Unexpected event number 5. Marcus called. Right then. On speaker. Perfect timing, truly. My husband answered. I didn't stop him. Again, not bravery. Shock. Marcus froze when he realized who he was talking to. Stammered something about work. My husband asked him very calmly how long he'd been thinking about my wife. Silence. Then Marcus hung up. That was the moment my husband stopped trying to save anything. I could see it. Something clicked shut behind his eyes. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just said, "So you lied." I corrected him. I said, "I didn't tell you everything," which is such a bitchy, lawyerly distinction that even I hated myself a little for saying it. He went for a walk, a long one, left his phone on the counter, left me alone in the house with the dog staring at me like it had opinions. When he came back, his hands were shaking. That's when the emotional part finally hit him. Anger first. Sharp, controlled anger. He asked how long. I gave him a shorter timeline than the truth. He asked if I loved Marcus. I laughed again, because apparently that's my stress response, and said, "Don't be ridiculous." That one hurt him the most, not because it was a lie, because it wasn't. The next few days blurred together in that awful way where time both crawls and disappears. He didn't leave right away, which surprised me. I thought he'd grab a bag and storm out like in movies. Instead, he stayed, slept on the couch, barely spoke, moved through the house like a guest who didn't trust the furniture. Every now and then I'd catch him staring at me like he was trying to reconcile two versions of the same person and failing. This is where his emotional spiral really kicked in. First was the shock, wide-eyed, quiet, almost polite. Then the anger, not explosive, not dramatic, cold, surgical. He started asking questions again, but different ones. Not why, but how. How often? Where? What I told Marcus about him. Which lies I'd rehearsed and which ones I'd improvised. I kept lying. Smaller lies now. Trimmed lies. Lies meant to soften the blow. Or at least that's what I told myself. I minimized. I deflected. I said things like, "You're focusing on the wrong part, and this didn't happen in a vacuum," which, yes, made him angrier. Unexpected event number 6. He called my sister. I didn't know until she showed up at the house unannounced, eyes red, jaw tight. She hugged him first. That felt like betrayal on top of betrayal, which I realize is rich coming from me, but still. Watching him cry into her shoulder cracked something in me I didn't know was left to crack. That was the first time he actually broke down, like full-on sobbing. Not loud, just collapsed. He kept saying he felt stupid, that he'd ignored signs because it was easier than admitting we were failing, that he didn't recognize his own life anymore. I sat there, useless, defensive, half sorry, half resentful, a horrible mix. I wanted to comfort him and also wanted him to stop making me feel like the villain in my own story. He asked me that night if I would stop talking to Marcus. I said yes, and for once, I meant it. I just didn't mean immediately. I told Marcus we had to stop. I didn't block him. I didn't cut him off clean. I sent one of those careful, emotionally cowardly messages that leaves a door cracked open just enough to haunt everyone involved. Something like, "Things blew up at home. I need space. Please don't make this harder," which if you've ever been a human being, you know is not a stop sign. It's a wait nearby. Unexpected event number 7. Marcus didn't take it well, at all. He showed up at my office the next morning, not storming, not yelling, worse, calm, smiling too much. He asked if we could talk, like we were co-workers discussing printer issues instead of the fact that my marriage was imploding. I panicked. I said no. He said okay, and then casually mentioned that his wife had gone through his phone. That sobered me up fast. He said she knew about me. Not everything, but enough. Names, screenshots. He said he'd told her it was one-sided, that I'd been confused and leaning on him. I didn't argue, which is probably the most honest thing I'd done in days. Meanwhile, at home, my husband was deep in the sadness phase. The anger cooled and turned inward. He started blaming himself, replaying every missed dinner, every ignored conversation. He kept asking what he could have done differently, which made me irrationally mad because, again, I hate being the sole bad guy. He started reading relationship books, articles, Reddit posts, ironically. I caught him scrolling through a subreddit about surviving infidelity at 2 a.m., tears just leaking out of him. That's when acceptance began, I think. Not forgiveness, just the understanding that this was real and couldn't be unseen. He told me he felt like his entire sense of reality had been edited without his consent. I almost told him the truth then, the full truth, that it wasn't just texts, that there were nights I stayed late on purpose, that I liked being chosen by someone else. I didn't. Instead, I held his hand and let him believe the version of me that was easier to survive. And yes, I know what that makes me. Unexpected event number 8 came from a place I really should have seen coming. Marcus's wife contacted my husband. She found him on Facebook, sent a long, careful message at 1:13 a.m., explaining that she was so sorry and that she thought he deserved the truth. She attached screenshots, not the worst ones. Marcus had already deleted those, but enough to paint a much clearer picture than the watered-down version I'd been selling. My husband read them alone in the guest room. I know because I heard him throw up. That was the night the emotional arc shifted from sadness to something harder. Not rage, not despair. Resolve. He came into the bedroom at dawn, eyes red but steady, and asked me one question. "Did you ever meet him outside of work?" I said no. That was the lie that ended everything. He didn't argue, didn't debate. He just nodded, like he'd expected it. Later, I learned he already knew. Marcus's wife had mentioned a hotel bar near the office, a detail I'd conveniently never brought up. That day, my husband called a lawyer, not dramatically, not angrily. He just did it between meetings, like scheduling a dentist appointment. He told me that evening, said he needed to understand his options, said he wasn't promising anything anymore. Not reconciliation, not separation, just clarity. Emotionally, He was done bargaining. No more, if we try harder. No more, maybe therapy. He told me he felt like he'd finally caught up to reality, and now he needed to decide what kind of life he wanted after it. I reacted badly, snippy, defensive. I accused him of giving up too easily, which is honestly impressive considering I was the one who detonated the marriage. I cried about how unfair it was that one mistake defined everything. He didn't respond. He just looked tired. That night, he slept in the guest room again. I lay awake, scrolling through my phone, staring at Marcus's last unread message like it was a relic from a past life. For the first time since this started, I felt something close to fear. Not of losing my husband, of losing control of the story. The shift after that was subtle, but brutal. He stopped asking questions entirely. No more late-night talks. No more emotional autopsies. He became efficient, started making lists, canceled a weekend trip we'd had planned for months, and didn't even look at me when he did it. He opened a new checking account, moved half the money, very calm, very methodical, like someone dismantling a life instead of fleeing it. Unexpected event number 9. He asked for a paternity test. We don't have kids. It's not a typo. He said it flatly, no accusation, no edge. Just, I need to know if you ever lied about anything that big. I snapped. I laughed. I told him he was being insane. He didn't react. Just wrote it down on his little yellow legal pad and said, okay. That scared me more than anything else so far. Emotionally, he was in acceptance mode now, but it wasn't peaceful. It was detached. He wasn't trying to understand me anymore. He wasn't trying to fix us. He was trying to protect himself from future me, like I was a known hazard. I tried to claw back control. I cried harder, apologized louder. I offered therapy again. I promised transparency. I said I'd quit my job. I said I'd block Marcus for real this time. All the grand gestures people suddenly find when the door actually starts closing. He listened. Then he said something I still can't shake. Everything you're offering now is something I begged for before you needed a backup plan. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with heartbreak anymore. I was dealing with someone grieving a version of his life that was already dead. That night, he told me he needed space. Not for a walk, not for a couch night. Actual space. He was going to stay with a friend for a while, not to punish me, to think. I told him I understood. I didn't. He moved out on a Tuesday, not dramatically. No suitcases lined up by the door, just a gym bag and his laptop, like he was leaving for a slightly longer than usual work trip. He hugged the dog. He didn't hug me. Unexpected event number 10. My mother called him before I did. I found out because she called me afterward, furious, asking what I'd done and why he sounded so broken. Apparently, he'd reached out to her to ask about some paperwork they'd helped us with years ago. Very practical, very final. She tore into me for a solid 15 minutes, then hung up without letting me defend myself, which fine, but also deeply rude considering she raised me. Living alone in the house was weird, too quiet. No background noise of him existing, no passive commentary on the news, no presence. I thought I'd feel relieved. I told people I did. I said it was good to have space. I said we were figuring things out. That was a lie I mostly told myself. Meanwhile, his emotional journey, because yes, I was still tracking it through mutual friends like a psycho, took an unexpected turn. He wasn't spiraling. He wasn't drinking himself into oblivion. He was going to the gym, sleeping, eating, seeing a therapist twice a week, apparently crying a lot in a very structured, healthy way. Acceptance apparently looks boring. He stopped responding to my texts unless they were about logistics, bills, mail, the dog's vet appointment. Every message from him read like an HR email. Polite, neutral, distant. I tried to provoke something, anger, sadness, nostalgia. He gave me nothing. I ran into Marcus again around this time, completely by accident. He looked worse, tired, guilty, smaller somehow. He told me his wife had kicked him out temporarily, asked if we could talk. I said no. Not because I'd grown morally upright overnight, but because I finally understood that men like Marcus don't save you from consequences. They just distract you until they arrive. For the first time since this all started, I felt alone in a way that couldn't be blamed on anyone else. And that realization landed harder than any confrontation ever did. The paperwork started showing up about a week later. Not divorce papers, yet, but things adjacent to them. Requests, disclosures, calm, beige envelopes that felt heavier than they should have. Unexpected event number 11. He asked for a written timeline. Not angrily, not accusingly. Just an email asking me to lay out, in my own words, when things started, what happened, and when they ended. He said it was for clarity. He said he needed to understand what was real and what wasn't. I stared at my laptop for hours. I wrote 3 different versions. One honest, one defensive, one that made me look like a misunderstood heroine in a sad marriage. Guess which one I sent? He didn't respond right away. When he finally did, it was just one sentence. This doesn't line up with what I already know. That was it. No follow-up, no argument, just confirmation that my credibility was officially gone. Emotionally, I could tell he was in the final stage now. Not grief, not anger, detachment. The kind that's quiet and irreversible. Friends told me he sounded lighter, that he laughed again sometimes. That hurt more than if they'd said he was miserable. I started spiraling, sleeping badly, picking fights with strangers online, rewriting memories in my head so I wasn't the villain. I told myself he'd pushed me away. I told myself anyone would have done what I did. I told myself the marriage had been dead already. All lies, or at least convenient half-truths. I tried one last emotional appeal. Showed up at his friend's place unannounced. Cried. Apologized for everything. Told him I finally understood how much I'd hurt him. He listened. Patient. Kind even. Then he said something I didn't expect. I believe you're sorry now. I just don't trust that you would have been if you hadn't been caught. There was no cruelty in it, no spite, just an observation. That's when it finally hit me, that this wasn't about whether he loved me anymore. It was about whether he could live with the version of me that existed now, that the truth was out. After that conversation, something shifted in me, which I hate admitting because it sounds like growth, and I'm not sure I deserve that arc. He stopped reaching out entirely. No emails, no texts, just silence punctuated by the occasional Venmo request with a painfully neutral note like utilities or insurance. That was it. Our entire marriage reduced to line items. Unexpected event number 12. I got laid off. I wish I could say it was dramatic or unfair or somehow tied to karma, but it was just corporate nonsense. Budget cuts, restructuring, the same buzzwords everyone gets fed right before security walks them out. I sat in my car afterward and laughed until I cried, because of course this would happen now. Of course I'd lose my job right as my husband was detaching from me with surgical precision. I told him, not because I wanted sympathy, but because I needed to. It affected shared finances. He replied an hour later, "Thanks for letting me know. I'll adjust my contributions." That was it. No, "Are you okay?" No, "That sucks." Just logistics. Emotionally, that's when it fully clicked for me how far he'd gone in his own process. Shock, anger, sadness, acceptance. He'd already done the tour. I was late. I was still bargaining while he was closing the gift shop. I tried to imagine him moving on, dating, laughing with someone else, telling this story from his perspective, where I'm a cautionary tale instead of the narrator. It made my stomach hurt in a way that felt different from guilt, less sharp, more hollow. I gave in and finally wrote the honest timeline, the real one. Sent it without commentary, without excuses, just facts, dates, places, decisions. I don't know if it helped. I don't know if it mattered. But for the first time, I wasn't trying to control the outcome, just the accuracy. And that felt unfamiliar. He replied to the honest timeline 2 days later, not with forgiveness, not with rage, with a thank you, just that. Thank you for finally being honest. Unexpected event number 13. He told me he'd decided to file for divorce the same day I lost my job, not as a punishment, not as revenge. He said he'd already been leaning that way, but reading the real timeline made something settle in him, like the last puzzle piece clicking into place, even if the picture was ugly. He said he didn't hate me. He said he didn't even think I was a bad person. He just didn't want to be married to someone he couldn't trust when things were boring, quiet, or hard. That hurt more than being called a monster. He explained his decision calmly, almost gently, said he'd learned something about himself through all this, that he'd rather be alone than constantly wondering what version of reality he was living in, that he ignored his own instincts for years because it felt easier than rocking the boat, that this was the first time in a long time he felt like he was choosing himself. I reacted badly. Again, I accused him of giving up right when things were finally honest. I said we could rebuild now, that this could be the real starting point. I told him people survive worse than this all the time. He nodded and said, "They do. I just don't want to." There was no fight left in him, no need to convince me. The decision was already done. He was just informing me like you inform someone the store is closing. After we hung up, I sat on the floor of the kitchen for a long time, not crying, just staring, realizing that all my lies, all my little edits and reframes hadn't protected me at all. They'd just delayed the moment where I had to face the consequences without a script. For the first time, I wondered what this story would sound like if I wasn't the one telling it. And I didn't like the answer. The weeks after that were all fallout. Quiet, administrative fallout. Forms, signatures, boxes. Unexpected event number 14. I found out I was pregnant. I'm kidding. Relax. Even I'm not that narratively cursed. The real unexpected thing was how normal everything became. Too fast. The world didn't pause because my marriage ended. The dog still needed walking. The trash still went out on Thursdays. Friends stopped asking for updates after the first awkward round of drinks, where everyone pretended not to take sides while absolutely taking sides. My husband, ex, I guess, even though the paperwork wasn't final yet, continued his clean break. He unfriended me quietly, changed passwords, forwarded his mail. He didn't block me, which somehow felt worse, like I just didn't warrant the effort anymore. Emotionally, I started replaying his entire arc backward. I could see it now, in hindsight, like a textbook. The shock when his face went blank in the kitchen, the anger sharpened into questions, the sadness when he blamed himself, the acceptance when he stopped trying to understand me. He did it all without theatrics, without ultimatums, without turning me into a villain out loud. That restraint made it harder to hate him, which meant there was nowhere left to put my defensiveness. I tried dating apps for about 3 days, deleted them. I wasn't looking for connection. I was looking for distraction, For proof I was still desirable, still chosen. It felt pathetic the second I admitted it to myself. I started therapy, not couples, just me. I told the story the way I tell it here, self-aware, sharp, a little sarcastic. My therapist didn't interrupt, just listened, then asked very calmly, "Do you think you've ever told this story without positioning yourself as smarter than the consequences?" That one landed, hard. For the first time, I stopped asking whether my husband overreacted. I started asking why I'd needed to be right, more than I'd needed to be honest. The divorce was finalized on a Friday afternoon. I signed the papers at my kitchen counter, alone, wearing an old sweatshirt of his I still hadn't thrown out because apparently that's my line in the sand. When it was done, my phone buzzed with a confirmation email, and that was it. No music, no closing monologue, just done. We didn't talk after, not because of bitterness, but because there was nothing left to clarify. He got what he needed, a clean exit, a story that finally made sense, and a life that didn't require constant second-guessing. I got the consequences I'd spent months trying to out-talk. What did he learn? Because I know that's what people on this subreddit usually want. He learned that ignoring small discomforts doesn't keep the peace, it just delays the explosion. That being easygoing can quietly turn into self-erasure. That trust isn't about grand gestures, but about consistency when no one's watching. He learned that love without honesty turns into surveillance, and that no relationship is worth living in detective mode. If he were the one posting here, he'd probably tell you this: don't gaslight yourself just because leaving feels dramatic. Don't wait for proof that hits you in the face, and don't accept a version of love that makes you feel smaller just to keep things intact. As for me, I learned I'm very good at sounding self-aware while avoiding real accountability. I learned that boredom isn't an excuse, and loneliness isn't a free pass. I learned that controlling the narrative feels powerful, right up until reality stops asking for your permission. I don't think I'm evil. I don't think he's perfect. But I do think I broke something that couldn't be unbroken, and no amount of clever explanations was ever going to change that. So if you're reading this and you're tempted to lie because the truth feels inconvenient, don't. Not because honesty guarantees forgiveness, but because lies guarantee a slower, uglier version of the same ending. And if you're on the other side of this, if you're the one staring at a phone screen realizing your life just split in two, believe this part at least. It does get quieter. And sometimes, quiet is how you know you survived.